Hello. All right. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Jan Elias. I'm the Director of Case Writing here at the School of Management, and have been, this Sunday will be year number 16. So I've been doing this for a while here. Usually I'm in the back room. You know, this is, the faculty does the case teaching. I just provide the cases for the teaching. But in this case, I really wanted to get up front because this is a case we actually prepared not for this event, but for teaching faculty how to teach or what could happen. So this is an actual incident that occurred here, and it has already been used in one faculty seminar. It'll probably be used in others. I should also say, I was expecting name cards. So I'll try. But if you put the name card, it may be a little far for me to see, but so I may be kind of rude and point to people when they want to call on them to participate in the class. So I thought that one way to get this started is the other thing, it's a really meta experience. I mean, we are now going to do a case about teaching cases. So there's a kind of a real meta, the people who like meta fiction. This is meta case teaching. And so it'll be a rather kind of exciting little adventure. One of the things that to remember here is everything in this case took place in a 4-minute period. So we have the ability, by stopping time and looking at the actions, to really kind of lay out what was going on here, what led to this kind of blow up in class. So if we could start by just, what was in Marcus's head, Marcus Leader's head, when this incident occurred? What are his objectives?
Sorry, what was in Marcus's head when? When this event occurred?
Yeah, when, yeah. What are his objectives? Go ahead, yeah.
He's trying to provide representation for female leaders.
Okay. What else is going on in his head as he is getting, as he hears this comment about the venture capitalists don't want to fund this person, this group of entrepreneurs because the women might get pregnant? Go ahead.
Minimize disruption and minimize hurt feelings.
Okay. Calm the situation. And why is this important to him? I mean,
Stick to the lesson plan, keep the class moving, avoid complaints, diffuse the situation.
lesson plan. This may all seem like it's spontaneous and everything, but we do have lesson plans, you know, and you have a number of things that you want to get through. This wasn't on the agenda, so to speak. So, what else is going on in his head?
He doesn't.
Oh, go.
He wants to make sure that students don't feel discouraged from commenting.
Right. He doesn't want to slap down poor Martin because he doesn't want to discourage. And what else?
He doesn't know if Martin, like, it was a language barrier or...
Yeah. What did this comment mean? You know, what was going on with Martin? So, comment, question marks, you know. You hear this comment, it's in this long statement about, well, I don't think they're technically capable of pulling this off. And, oh, by the way, they might get pregnant and you'd lose your investment, or the VCs would get worried about the entrepreneurial journey. So what else? It's so funny because what the faculty immediately picked up on is one thing that none of you have picked up on.
I don't know if that's what it is, but I think Marcus failed in his lesson plan to frame the case in terms of his intentions, because he ostensibly chose it to think about how, you know, women entrepreneurs, you know, might be received in the VC world.
Right.
And he did wait until minute, 65 and he didn't even raise it. I mean, I think he said, let's see, what does it say here?
You just said, why aren't these people getting financed?
For 65 minutes of the course, he hadn't really raised this topic.
Yeah.
And so he did, by not making that explicit and intentional at the beginning, he didn't really signal that this was part of the point of the discussion.
Well, it said he also wanted to avoid, he didn't want to get into the gender gap or the reasons behind it. So if he wants to, he wants to sort of skim the surface of the topic, but not really dive in.
That is the number one thing that the professors picked up on when you teach it.
Well said.
I haven't done the research. I don't have the numbers, you know? I don't know exactly what's going on. Going into a classroom situation with without the research for a professor, it's like he doesn't have his superpowers. You know, this is like Thor's hammer or, X-ray vision for Superman. This is his big thing, and if he doesn't have the research backing him up, he can't respond. He feels hamstrung. So, all right, pretty good. This gives you. He's stressed. It's minute 65. He put this case on the syllabus simply for a representational thing without thinking it could devolve into really question about what gender would mean. Michael?
It says that the intention was to have a quote unquote helpful discussion of women-led companies.
Yeah.
That's not just a cosmetic matter of having female protagonists.
This is true. This is true.
It comes back to this question.
Yeah.
What is the framing of the case discussion? Cases don't frame themselves.
Nope.
Okay, so what did he do to frame the discussion?
Yeah. No, exactly. And he treated it in the discussion as if it were, here's a venture, here's their pitch, here are the VCs, let's talk about that. What are the prospects? What's the balance sheet look like? You know, what is the market conditions? All those kinds of things. And then when this comment comes out.
But the question comes too late.
Yep.
That's the point, right?
Yeah.
If you know, one of the helpful discussions might be about how women-led companies could raise money despite the difficulties of doing so.
Yeah.
That was the point of the case teaching in this session. Then that framing should have emerged early on. You could postpone coming to conclusions on that by analyzing the broader situation. But it seems as if, from the way the case was presented, that didn't happen. So he set himself up for disaster.
He did. He did. There was a disaster waiting here because the moment came through and it happened from a classroom discussion. He didn't raise it and say, why are the women here not succeeding? Or it was much more this foreign student raising this question.
No, it says here, Lager said, why is this company having trouble raising funding?
Right.
That's the question.
Yes, but it's not because he didn't frame it in terms of women. He framed it in general. And of course he would. And he did. I mean, he wanted the benefit of doing a representational case and saying that women are represented in the curriculum, in the syllabus that he put together. He didn't really want to talk about women in the case study.
He doesn't know how to teach cases. As simple as that.
He was a junior faculty member starting it out.
No, here's your explanation.
All right, but now let's look at what the women. What are the women? Why are they responding in such a way to this comment in class?
They're offended.
Offended. Could we
expand on that?
Yeah, expand on it.
First of all, we get baited a bit when we're told that Roy is a foreign student because it makes us somehow believe that he would have a different cultural perspective, which may or may not be true. The professor wonders whether he's trying to harken back to a different time and a different culture and a different way of thinking, or whether this is how he really feels.
Right.
Either way, the women sit there and feel the pain of the bias that exists naturally in the culture as it is, and they respond to it. As such, they're offended. And rightfully so. I don't want to make it seem like they shouldn't be.
What else? Yes.
I would be offended as a woman getting this case because it's 20 years old. I mean,
Yeah.
It's already 20 years old. Why are we talking about the past? Why aren't we focusing on something current that we should be addressing? And, you know, if we're currently in this class.
Yeah, no, by the way, and then we'll get back to this in the later parts of my presentation. Cases get used over and over and over again. There are cases in our curriculum that are 50 years old. That is because, and we'll get into this, so it's not unusual to have something that was 20 years old. Probably when the case was written, the case itself wasn't framed as something that has to do with female entrepreneurs. It probably was framed much more, oh, here's an interesting story, and by the way, you know, that kind of thing. So very much there is this kind of choosing of cases. It probably had some other reasons for it being chosen. Why else? And I think going into what the TA reported to Leader at the end of the session there, what else is influencing the women? I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Giannis?
Yanni? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm a Jan too. His point was that they were offended, but was. Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I mean, like this, yeah, you can be offended, but this is you're literally in business school, and these students might be looking to raise capital for themselves, and if they're looking for peers to fundraise for them, for example, and they hear that their peers are not ready to support them because they're looking to get pregnant anymore, why should I fund you? You have a classroom environment where your peers are telling you, we think that because you could become pregnant, if we were venture capitalists, we would support you. It's not just like a conceptual thing. For a lot of people, this is actually what they want to do with their career.
They're not taking a class in entrepreneur, raising venture funds unless they're actually thinking about this as a possible career path. And now they're being told that something that the VCs they're pitching to might think that they'll get pregnant and the VCs will lose their investment, or the whole thing will go south because of that. And this is personal, very good point. It's really personal. Go ahead, Abby.
I think also building on our discussion about Marcus, they're probably picking up on the immediate cues of the professor who isn't being supported. He seems uncomfortable by the nature of the uncomfortable discussion, and he doesn't come out in support, and he hasn't teed it up specifically in order to have what could be a productive, uncomfortable discussion around something like this. He seems sort of aghast and wanting to sweep it under the rug, and so that makes him feel further unsupported in addition to what the guy is saying.
Go ahead, yes.
They also said in their response to the TA that this was part of a broader pattern. This wasn't the first time they heard this. It was a pattern specifically at business school, their experience at School of Management as women, of being undermined or offended or many various things related to their gender.
And this is something that Marcus wouldn't know. And in fact, and you all as alums can talk about this, much more of your socialization happens outside the classroom than inside the classroom. So whatever kind of dynamics are going on outside, you go to a group and say, well, I'm thinking of starting my own entrepreneurial venture. What do you think? And you get pushed to the side because you're a woman. This all builds, and suddenly this comment that maybe you pass over if it was a one-off is suddenly maddening to an extent that it really derails the class. In fact, as the case says, one woman dropped the class, and they complained to other senior faculty members. So a great deal of consternation around this, but some of this, Marcus is a junior faculty member, and he might have not known or just unaware of what was going on in terms of that. There's an interesting dynamic going on here as well, if you pick up on it, if you slow down the entire sequence. This is like one of those frame-by-frame dissections. You had that initial comment, which was rather ambiguous, not ambiguous, it was rather pointed, but you're not sure it's ambiguous because it's in a larger comment. So there's a lot of uncertainty. Leader's response, which I think, if I'm reading the room correctly, everyone thinks was kind of non-committal. Today we don't treat pregnancy this way. The people share the burden, et cetera, et cetera. So that wasn't really talking to Martin, because here he's worried about, what is the question, calm the situation, do those kinds of things. But then, and then Sarah's comment goes directly to Marcus's comment, but Rebecca ups the ante, right? Rebecca says, what about the gender gap? Yes.
I think, to me, this is about teaching as much as anything, because, and I know that's the case, as you said, it's not a case of not observing anything you haven't already told us, but in that moment for Marcus, you have your lesson plan, but something has arisen that's different. And to get curious in the space of like this comment and say, interesting, Barton, so what do others think? How do people respond to that? Let's hear some different viewpoints on that. And just play it out, or even go probe with him and say, tell us more about why that's coming up for you. Are you playing a part here? Is this really something that you observed and experienced in life? But he didn't feel comfortable as a professor, as a teacher in that moment, veering from his plan. And I think teaching, if nothing else, is seizing those moments where you can learn and you can learn together. And to have that confidence, whether you have the research or not, that's what teaching is about to me, is being able to be live in that moment with your students.
No, I agree, and especially case teaching. I mean, it's one thing to sit up here and stand up here and give you a lecture. But case teaching is all about getting responses and responding to responses. We'll get Jason and then we'll go around.
Yeah, no, I mean, I always like to think about what's not in here, and I think, you know, being a woman is one aspect of identity, but we don't know if there's any other elements of intersectionality that are important to consider here. Are they women of color? Are they older women, younger women? Are they, you know, somewhere on the gender spectrum?
Right.
Are they already parents? Are they not parents? Right. So I think it's very easy to sort of just broad blanket, hey, this is obviously a problem for women in general and entrepreneurship, but I think it is important to consider, are there other factors that may be, you know, because of intersectionality, are they doubly not as likely to get funding because of other reasons?
And on top of everything, we don't know Rebecca and Sarah's story beyond characters in this play that I wrote. You know, they're here only as we don't know what their situation is and why that might have influenced them as well.
And also from Martin's.
I see you.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. Caitlin, go on.
From Martin's side, someone already mentioned, like, he's an international student, there might be cultural elements, but he's being very direct in some ways. Like, yes, there's a little ambiguity, but he said from the investor's perspective, it would interfere with the startup journey. Like, he might just be from a much more direct culture and didn't feel the need to caveat by saying, I don't think this personally, but, and he's just, the question was, why are they having trouble raising funding? Well, the investors might be scared to give it to them. So,
yeah.
The women sort of jumped on it right away, but it might not have been as.
Yeah, no, and that is, though you get into this thing, is like, we become very adept at disguising our sexism. You know, it's not me, but someone might say that you will get pregnant and the investor will lose all your money.
Yeah, I was going to say something along those lines. Part of the ambiguity is the fact that English was a second language. So it's hard from reading this to tell whether Martin believes that on the one hand, there's no reason it was justified not to invest in this company because the women are going to get pregnant, in the same way that, you know, and a totally sexist comment, versus on the other end of the spectrum, you know, this happens all the time. Women aren't hired. Women will present for a job with a superior resume and will not get picked for this because of the pregnancy question, and that may be essentially saying that's why, whether it's right or wrong, the VCs won't invest in this company.
Yeah, and then he didn't caveat it. He didn't put anything around his comment at all. It just came out blunt. Brian.
Well, whether or not anybody decides to give Martin the benefit of the doubt, for me, the beginning part or the end of the class, it hinges on if something happens and you notice some people in the class are noticeably aghast. That's an extreme enough description to say, as a leader in the front, that something has changed. And if you're doing that in a corporate meeting or something has changed in the tenor of whatever was expected or planned, where some kind of a timeout is warranted in order to be curious about what the hell just happened, because we don't know anybody's personal context.
Right. No.
And so that he would have had to have probably made the next class maybe about something that could maybe address feelings. I mean, and whoever is feeling this, whether it's one of the male or female staff, this is an emotionally charged issue that's personal, even if it's not from personal experience. So he lost the opportunity right there.
Right. Great segue. If you could all just like in little groups around, no formal thing, just around, discuss what you would advise Marcus to do at this point. What do you do? And let's also be a little bit specific about modalities, like interpersonal, face-to-face, talk to Rebecca and Sarah or the other women in the class, emails. What do you do? What do you do in this case? Just if you could discuss, just a small group, people around you.
What do we do after the entire case, or what would we have done better in the moment?
You can go into that, but I think it's Robin. Robin and Michael have framed how they weren't prepared in the first place. So. I've always wanted to do that. I've always wanted to do that for the board up.
Yeah, no, but he could just go on and pretend as if this never
Is it one-on-one conversation?
All right, let's, if we could bring it back, share some of your group wisdom. I'll give it a couple minutes more. All right, if we could bring this back to the all right, if we could bring it back to the center here, and this has actually never happened in my experience where the groups want to keep on talking and need to go away. So, by the way, in the name of kind of transparency and meta teaching, this technique of breaking up into groups and talking about it is actually one of the preferred techniques in teaching if you're worried about getting inclusion into classrooms, because it allows everyone to have a voice at least within a small group, even if some people dominate a kind of a classroom setting like this. So breaking into small groups and allowing everyone to have a voice and talk to one another is actually a good methodology. That said, did we generate some solutions?
Sure.
Anyone? Go ahead.
Yeah, we came up with a whole array of solutions that include one-on-one conversations with each of the people who had spoken out in the time, bringing in somebody who has expertise in facilitating discussions around gender or intersectionality sort of issues to the next class, letting people know ahead of time that that's going to happen and the reason it's going to happen so that people can come to class hopefully with the right framing for the discussion to make it a productive discussion. And did I miss anything?
No. Oh, he would send that, did you say he would send out an email?
With that framing of,
Yeah, and have them think about something related to what they were going to talk about for the first 15 minutes of the following class.
Sorry, wrote that. Email to students, and this is to everybody.
Yes.
Everyone in the class gets an email, says, next class we're going to do something. We're going to discuss this, and we're going to have framing. We might have a facilitator in there. Emily.
We talked about a bunch of really similar things, some coaching, some one-on-one conversations, and then a broader discussion in the next class, with the expectation that there were people who felt similarly but just hadn't spoken. But Jason called out one really interesting thing, which was the note that there were female faculty members who were upset, and that was potentially a really interesting opportunity for Marcus to get some feedback from his peers or other faculty and to learn from them, as opposed to just the one-on-one conversations with the students.
And I would just add to that, I'm sorry, the order of operations I think is really important here, because you risk sending the wrong signals if you have a conversation, for instance, with Martin before you have it with the women, or and then potentially the female faculty needs to happen even before that, so that you feel prepared to have a better one-on-one discussion. But the order matters because there's obviously a lot of you don't want to be signaling the wrong thing.
And in the email, he would also take responsibility for the problem that came out of it. So that would somewhat diffuse things and get the students thinking that he really wanted to resolve it well and responsibly.
The apology via email containing that exact point, the insult or the transgression occurred in the group, so the apology should happen with the group, but swiftness should be more important than reconvening the setting, and then he sets the stage for a rebuilding.
We had 3 points on getting this right. One was that Marcus should take responsibility along the lines of what was saying for having responded in such a wishy-washy manner, and talk about how he really feels about the sexist comment. Number 2, that the productive discussion that follows might be more around obstacles that women entrepreneurs face in the workplace, and in the world of venture financing. And number 3 was that he might point out that in the world going forward with open carry, people might have to be very concerned about making offensive comments.
Open carry.
Thank you for reminding us.
Who has not changed. 37 years.
Is there any additional ideas, thoughts on which I will tell you, as a group, you are far harder on Marcus than the faculty was. the faculty was, Giannis?
I thought he completely lost the room, and I think he was completely unprepared, and I thought he showed poor class management. The analogy I was giving is when you're refereeing a game, you have to control the field. And if somebody commits an egregious foul, say in a soccer match, you blow the whistle as loud as you can, you get everybody's attention, and you deal with it fairly. He did none of that. He kind of kicked the can down the thing. He was horrible.
Yeah.
I mean, it was miserable what he did. So I would not give him any slack.
Is it possible, so I think kind of building on that, I think with Marcus, it just seemed like he just missed an opportunity to actually talk about a factor. Maybe, it was inartfully worded by Martin. He inartfully worded something, but he brought up the underlying issue is bias. And he sort of missed the opportunity to talk about how much of a role bias may play in fundraising, even though it might have been inartfully worded by Martin. So I think that's neither here nor there for me. I think it's sort of devolving into Martin said something bad, people took offense to it, but it's almost like the professor just refused to even consider the factor of bias in the role in the TM question that he faced, or that he put out for the class, and so he's already coming into the conversation with a bias that this bias doesn't exist.
Good point. Yes.
And therefore, let's not talk about it.
Yeah.
And let's just be aspirational and wishy-washy and we shouldn't be doing this. But the reality is, this person has a point of view because that bias does exist.
It does. More, Michael?
Just on the apology point, first of all, it has to feel very authentic, even if prepared, and email isn't the best medium for that. So acknowledging something out of order happened is one thing, but he may save the apology if that's what's needed to recover for the appearing directly in front of the class. And then the second point is on the substance of the apology. What is he apologizing for? I think it's unclear to me what he's apologizing for.
What would you say he would be apologizing for if he did?
I think he'd be apologizing for being an incompetent teacher, in particular with the response, because it's not clear what the response, how the response was meant to be relevant to what was going on in the class. In part because with case teaching, once you lose the frame of being in the case, everything goes to hell. But I mean, basically, neither the students nor he were able to cooperate around case teaching.
Right.
And so, to me, that's the main issue. But his response didn't help. His response was outside the frame of the case discussion and was poor as a response outside the case discussion. So, I'm not sure apology is quite the right concept here. Repair, yes. Apology, maybe.
All right, we go here.
I think some people know about the whole idea of calling in versus calling out. And it's...
I don't, so please explain.
Oh, well, in this situation, especially a bias-charged situation, like with Martin's comment, you can choose... You can have what happened, but you could also do what you were talking about, and is to call him in deeper, is to embrace what he said and say, tell me where that's coming from. What is your intent in that conversation? What's going on? Unpack it, and allow everybody else to do that, and keep that. When you call someone in, you've got to be. It's very hard. It's something that I would say Marcus needs training in. But then you can, if you can create the safe space to be able to call that in and go further, and then allow people to join in that call in, and then you don't have people like the young ladies, or we don't know how young they're, older. The women doing their shout outs, which was just more calling out, yeah. Which becomes very damaging, and nobody's going to learn anything from that. I don't know. So I think in terms of what you were saying was the apologizing for, I think part of it is, you could say bad teaching, but it's also not going deeper to prevent something like what happened. I don't know, just a thought.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's for being timid and for not addressing. I was thinking of something similar to what you said before around not calling out the bias in the original case, because if I was a woman in this class, I would be less annoyed by Martin's comment and more annoyed by the fact that we didn't actually address that. Yes, there are like times when that women-led companies aren't as funded, aren't as supported, because he said that's what he wanted to do. Like, he wanted this case to help allow a helpful discussion of women-led companies, particularly the challenges they may face, and he didn't want to dive into it. So to me, it would just be like,
yeah,
I was too timid to jump in.
Yeah, I think that just adding to that, the one thing that Robin pointed out that really stuck with me is this sentence that says it resulted in a blow up with hurt feelings of many of his female students. This idea of hurt feelings is a very coded language for women being emotional. And I think if he sent out an email saying, I'm sorry, some of you had hurt feelings, it actually makes it worse. Yeah. But to your point, if it's about him and what he did wrong in the situation, then it diffuses the situation and allows it to move forward and for everyone.
All right. I have a little bit of a wrap up here. First of all, I'll tell you what actually did happen is he did not address it, much to the amazement of a lot of things, in the next class or even the next class. The week after the thing, he gave a whatever these are, 90-minute sessions, 90-minute lecture on the gender gap in entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley and other places, talking about it all the way through the pipeline of the process. Starting with, okay, there are fewer women in STEM. This leads to fewer this, fewer that. So going down the entire pipeline, this seemed to help his class. He did not lose the class, though what's at stake here is very often you will lose the class. Nothing you say after you lost the class, even if it is on a skill-based matter, this is how you do a discounted cash flow or something like that, it's just not going to register. But now, again, teachers get better. And now this lecture is always a part of this course. It frames, but he learned that he lost the framing. He wanted points for having women representationally, and then when the comment came out, it wasn't such a good thing, and he didn't handle it in the moment. I should add that Marcus Leader is actually someone for whom English is not his first language either. So we had this kind of, when we talked about it, he talked about how he was new to the culture and didn't really know what he should be doing in that. He's learned, and in fact, it was very nice of him to share this incident and be willing to sit down with me. I take your point. Maybe the hurt feelings was the case writer's choice of thing, and as the case writer, I might have probably thinking about it, should maybe change the wording on that a bit. Rather than hurt feelings, just talk about tumult or dissension in the class. This is classroom stuff. And oh, by the way, I wanted to build on one of Brian's insights here at the end, just before we went to the group stuff. Brian made the point, this happens in meetings. This happens in your place of business, even if you're not a teacher. So it is helpful to think about these things, how issues can be misframed, how hurtful things can be said in discussions. So it is a good skill to reflect on. I have, from our friends at the Porvu Center. The Porvu Center is this new center on the Yale campus that is for teaching resources. And they have put out a kind of a short, very short brochure of some ideas of what to do in discussing sensitive matters in class. You can all pick it up. I didn't give it to you first because I didn't want you to just read off the Porvu Center ideas on what to do. So this is in class. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about what I do, about what to put into class, i.e. the case writing efforts that we've been making at the school, and give you a little taste of it. This isn't all the stuff that we have done, but it gives a little bit of a taste of where we're going on this. So diversity in the classroom, as you might know, until recently, most of the cases that we've had here at the School of Management have been white male protagonists, white male characters. It was throughout the curriculum. It was fairly difficult to find a case that didn't have a white male protagonist. There are three challenges to updating the curriculum, so to speak. First of all, it's really difficult to find companies that are willing to have cases written about them. Two, it's really difficult. Someone will come to you at a reunion or somewhere else and say, I got this great story, this thing happened. And the professor in their mind will go, I don't know how that relates to my syllabus. That doesn't teach discounted cash flow. This doesn't teach line balancing, something like that. So you have this Venn diagram of companies that will allow you in, and then companies that have something happen that you want to teach. And that's a very narrow Venn diagram. Going to Christina's point again, that's the reason you had 20-year-old cases. You actually had, in our curriculum, there was a case that was, I know, I used to be at Harvard. This case was written at Harvard in 1947. And it continues to be taught because it covers the topic so well. What they have done to update it is it was about making vacuum tubes, and then they made transistors, and now they're making chips. But it's the same case. They just changed the product to make it more relevant. Caitlin?
Apologies if you don't want to go down this path because it might derail a little, but I'm just wondering about like the ethics for some of it. Could you just change names and make the names more representative of like either a female name or a different cultural name? I mean,
Well, and sometimes we do. Sometimes we do. And we do that. But then the cases, if you don't know this, are cleared by the company. So those, we don't want you to be that gender anymore. And so we're changing your gender. So, but we made a commitment. One is that representation does matter. It's difficult to go into a class and see male, white decision makers for all of your cases and not think it's sending a signal. It's unintended, but kind of unmistakable. And the second thing is DEI is, and that's for diversity, equity, and inclusion, an important management issue. And we've kind of developed cases for both things. So in terms of representation, some of them are pretty easy lifts. We have a case now on Roger Ferguson, who is the vice chairman of the Fed Board of Governors on 9/11. At that time, Alan Greenspan was the chairman of the board. He was in an airplane. Most of the other board of governors were not there. They needed immediate decisions on what was going on. He was the point man. He was the man who made all the decisions. It's a great case for Bill English, who teaches a course on central bank management and so on. And Roger Ferguson was just, he made the right calls. He had a bunch of decisions. And for pedagogical teaching objective purposes, he went through the whole checklist of what the Fed does in terms of keeping the money supply rolling and so on and so forth. So this is kind of low-hanging fruit. I should add that Bill English was the chief economist at the New York Fed at the time of 9/11, so he knows very well what happened with Roger Ferguson there. Other places, these two cases came to us. We didn't actually make contact with the companies in these two cases because there was so much material already on what had happened that we could write the case from third-party material. Vicki Holub, well, I should tell you the course. It was Jake Thomas and Geert Ruenhurst teach a course on sourcing and managing funds in companies. So they have a module on mergers and merger synergies. So we looked at Occidental Petroleum with Vicki Holub, who is the first female CEO of a major oil company, and her decision to take over Anadarko. And it was very controversial, but a wonderful platform to talk synergies and whether or not the synergies are real when you do the accounting. Catherine Marinello was the CEO of Hertz, the rental car company. In 2019, they restructured the debt. Very important, interesting thing. And then they ran into a situation in which they had absolutely no revenue. So what happened and how even restructuring the debt did not support that. But so, again, these are two women that we have included now, and everyone does the sourcing and managing funds class. Sometimes the cases are in your own backyard. We did a case on Synchrony Financial Services. Margaret Keane is the CEO, or was the CEO at the time that we did the case. It's a case on innovation in financial services, especially for millennials. I don't know if you're aware of this, but millennials are going back to the 50s. Buy now, pay later is the way to go. Synchrony Finance is the spin-out of GE Financial. So they are the largest processor. They do Walmart's processing. They do the processing for Amazon cards on the back end. So they are very interested on why people aren't using credit cards and what they can do to compete and so on. So we also do a thing, for those of you who haven't been here lately, called raw cases here. Not all of our cases are written like the one we presented here. They're presented online. And the great thing about online cases is that you can present a little bit, little snippets of discussion, sometimes not 100% to the issue. In this case, it was innovation. So we got Margaret Keane to talk a little bit about her resume and how she got to where she was. Please work. Whoops, I jumped ahead. Let me go back. Oh, well, all right. There we go.
So you got to realize I've been working a long time. Women back then were mostly in those nice, fluffy, functional roles. And I saw that if you really wanted to get ahead, you had to own a P&L. And so I made the decision. I went to my boss and said, I want to go do this. She thought I was crazy, like taking an actual step down. But I'm like, I think if I don't do it now, I'm going to always be in these corporate functions. So I went and I did that for a year, and within a year got promoted and was running the P&L, so that worked out pretty well. Did that for quite a while, then moved into back up to corporate because they needed some strategy work done on the mortgage business. I then went and switched over to the retail bank, moved my way up the retail bank chain. And my last job there was running operations for Citibank in New York. And, to be frank, I was working incredible hours. I mean, operations is just a different world. I recommend everyone should do an operations role, by the way. I think it's the best learning experience because stuff happens all the time and you need to have facts. You usually don't have 100% of the facts. You have to make decisions quick. You need to resolve customer issues or employee issues or whatever it is, and you got to go. And I learned so much in that role, but it was really taking a toll on my family. I was working probably 6 a.m. till 10 at night, 5 days a week. And because it's operations, when there was a snowstorm or the system went down or anything happened, I was on calls, robberies, whatever.
So a little bit of career advice, interesting when it's coming from a female CEO of a major financial firm. We have other cases that we've now more protagonists. It's a slow process. Again, slow because it's hard to find situations that fit the curriculum and so on, but we're getting a bit more, a better representation among our protagonists. There are a lot of cases that we've been doing, some cases that we've been doing about the problems of diversity and inclusion in companies and how companies are struggling with this. Nielsen, they are the ratings people. It's a multi-billion-dollar business to get ratings, and people pay for these ratings. They have to ensure that the ratings are accurate, and they do that by putting in devices into, right now, 40,000 homes, a sample of 40,000 homes, and that reports back, and that creates the ratings that set the ad rates for all stuff that you see on television, and also there are other ways that the ratings are used. At the backbone of their operation are these people called marketing representatives, MRs, who go to the houses that are selected by computer and say, can we put these devices in your home? They, during the pandemic or right before the pandemic, they did a survey of their marketing representatives and discovered that while the base pays between white and black marketing representatives were relatively equal, the bonus pay, which for some represented a huge bonus, was way shifted to white marketing representatives. So that is the kind of the problem we presented to the students. Again, the magic of doing these cases is that you can give students voices and tell them of people that they might not otherwise come into contact with. So here are...
I had gone to
some marketing reps.
The panelists, they answered the door, and before I had a chance to introduce myself, get a word out of my mouth, the man at the house told me to remove myself off his property.
I've been to locations that I did not feel safe. Not only because of the environment, but sometimes because of who I am. Sometimes people will look at me